Yeah, hello there. I decided I wanted to make a little video after a while. But I really didn't want to talk about next-gen consoles this time. I actually wanted to turn back the clock and talk a little more about the older stuff. Much older stuff. Like, PS3. Because it's my favorite console, you know? So, a while back, I wanted to avoid an argument with a friend on NeoGaf about the problems with the PS3 and the similarities between the supposed problems according to some devs with the Xbox Series X and said PlayStation because of bumping bandwidth in the RAM. And this person said to me that the PS3 didn't really have any problems with RAM. It was just the cell was hard to work on, and developers got over that, and it might not be such a possible hurdle for the Xbox Series X to get over, which I didn't want to argue with this person over that. It's just that it's not even that I don't agree, it's just absolutely not the case. See, I have been studying the cell. I've seen a lot of papers from developers and professors that worked with the cell, use the cell, and there's a lot of things that YouTubers are not going to tell you about the PS3's problems. They're just going to tell you, oh, the cell was a nightmare to work for, and the split RAM was just a huge problem. Actually, no, it was a lot more than that. It was a lot more than that. And I thought I'd talk about this once and for all, because I talked to developers, I talked to professors. You see, they keep talking about how the cell was hard to code for. It was easier than the PS2, because the Emulsion engine, at its core, you had assembly level machine language, plus you had to work on proprietary languages for the vector units. That was much harder than the PS3, because with the PS3, if you're an indie developer and you didn't want to work closer to the metal and just slap some code together, you could work on C and C++. And you can use NVIDIA shader language, which was, according to these devs, easier to use back then than HLSL. C for graphics was, according to them, easier to use. No, the problems with the cell was actually a little bit deeper than that. You see, it wasn't just a split RAM that was holding the console back. That was a little problem with the advancements of such streaming processors on a CPU. It was RAM starved. You see, these streaming processors, they work very similar to what we have in GPUs now, but the caveat was the cell was a vacuum of data. It relied on constant streams of data to keep it going, otherwise it would hitch out like crazy. Developers that understood what the cell needed tried to find ways to have SPEs do jobs that would keep feeding it constant data non-stop in order to get the best performance out of it. We've never, the best looking games on on the PS3, they maxed out the console, but they never maxed out the cell. Not in a way that they could push it further, but the thing was they were stopped with something. Because of the way cell worked, it needed more data. It needed more RAM. I was looking at a white paper from one professor, and basically, if you wanted a more steady workflow for the cell on the PS3, Sony would have had to have quadrupled the RAM. Unifying the RAM would have never been enough. A measly 512 megs would have never been enough to appease cell, even back then. No, this was a RAM-eating monster. You would have needed at least 2 gigabytes total of RAM, either unified or split, to satiate this CPU. It was just a math monster. It was an absolute math monster. You couldn't just put data in there and expect everything to work fine. No. And it took developers way too long to get that. And that's why the PS3 had been held back for so long. It was a new kind of architecture for CPUs that just, it got killed off because of how forward-thinking it was. The technologies and the cell streaming processing units would later go on into the multi-processing units that are now in GPUs from AMD and NVIDIA. Whether they are the compute unit streaming processors on AMD or the CUDA cores on NVIDIA, they managed to perfect that technology that got started over at IBM. And that's the real tragedy of the PS3. That's the real tragedy of the cell. The vision of that architecture had to be realized elsewhere. This is Jules1, signing out.